Good morning, everyone, and welcome to yet another video on international business environment. In this video, we're going to study about theories of FDI. Okay, so there are traditional as well as modern theories of FDI. Now, before that, let's study what is FDI. FDI, as you all know, is an investment made by a company or individual in one country in business interest in another country. So in the form of either establishing business operations or acquiring business assets in the other country. So such as ownership or controlling interest in the foreign company. So that is FDI, right? Okay, so let's find out different traditional theories of FDI. The very first one is capital arbitrage theory. Now, the theory states that direct investment flows from countries where profitability is low to countries where profitability is high. So it means therefore that capital is mobile, both nationally and internationally. But sometimes implications is that countries with abundant capital should export and countries with less capital should import. So if there was a link between the long-term interest rate and return on capital, portfolio investment and FDI should be moving in the same direction, right? So that is capital arbitrage theory, right? So and next is international trade theory, wherein the country will specialize in production of and export those commodities which make intensive use of the country's relatively abundant factor. For example, in India, what is abundant factor? It is agricultural products, right? So this is how the international trade theory is. Now, the next is modern theories. The very first one in modern theory is product life cycle theory. So, international product life cycle theory provides a theoretical explanation for both trade and FDI. This theory, developed by Raymond Vernon, explains why US manufacturers shift from exporting to FDI. The manufacturers initially gain a monopolistic export advantage from product innovations developed for the US market. So in the new product stage, production continues to be concentrated in the United States. Even though production costs in some countries may be lower, so when the product becomes standardized in its growth product stage, the US manufacturers has an incentive to invest abroad, right? To exploit lower manufacturing cost and to prevent the loss of the export market to local producers, right? So the US manufacturer first investment will be made in another industrial country where export sales are large enough to support economies of scale in local production. We have already studied what is economies of scale in last video. So in the mature product stage, cost competition among all producers, including imitating foreign firms, intensifies. So at this stage, the US manufacturer may also shift production from the country of the initial FDI to the lower cost country, sustaining the old subsidiary with new products. So the Vernon's theory is more relevant to manufacturers, initial entries into foreign markets, and then to MNEs that have FDI already in place. So many MNEs are able to develop new products abroad for subsequent sale in the United States, thus standing the product life cycle model on its head. Like for example, Procter & Gamble employed more than 8,000 scientists and researchers in 2000 in 18 technical centers in 9 countries. So many new products in the healthcare and beauty care segments were developed in these offshore research centers. And what happened, marketed in the United States and other foreign countries. So these MNEs can also transfer new products from the United States directly to their existing foreign subsidiaries, thereby skipping the export stage, right? So Otis Elevator, a wholly owned subsidiary of United Technology Corporation, offers its products in more than 200 countries and maintains major manufacturing facilities in Europe, Asia, and United States, right? So despite being headquartered, Otis is headquartered in the United States. 80% of Otis 2005 revenues of $9.6 billion were generated elsewhere outside its headquarters. So most of OT's new elevators, escalators, the products, moving walkways, and shuttle systems were first developed in USA and then transferred to and manufactured by its foreign subsidiaries in the target overseas markets. Although the company increasingly engages in the development work abroad. So this is how this theory works. Next is monopolistic advantage theory. Now the monopolistic advantage theory suggests that the MNEs possesses monopolistic advantage, enabling it to operate subsidiaries abroad more profitably than local competing firms can. So the monopolistic advantage theory suggests suggests that the MNEs possesses monopolistic advantage, enabling it to operate subsidiaries, right? So the advantage is the benefit accrued to a firm that maintains the monopolistic power in the market. So such advantage are specific to the investing firms rather than to the location of its production, right? Now, Stephen H. Hammer found that FDI takes place because powerful MNEs choose industries or markets in which they have greater competitive advantage, such as technological knowledge not available to other firms operating in the given country. So these competitive advantages are also referred to as firm-specific or ownership-specific advantages, right? So according to this theory, monopolistic advantages come from two sources. One is superior knowledge and second is economies of scale. Now, the term knowledge includes production, technologies, managerial skills, right? Industrial organization, and of course, knowledge of the product. So, although the MNEs could possibly exploit its already developed superior knowledge through licensing to foreign markets, many types of knowledge cannot be directly sold. So, this is because it is impossible to package technological knowledge in a license, as is true for managerial expertise, industrial organization, knowledge of markets, and such. So even when knowledge can be embodied in a license, a local producer may be unwilling to pay its full value because of uncertainties about its realization, right? So given these reasons, the MNEs realizes that it can obtain a higher return by producing directly through a subsidiary than by selling the license, right? So besides superior knowledge, another determinant of FDI is the opportunity to achieve economies of scale. Now, economies of scale occur through horizontal or vertical FDI. So an increase in production through horizontal investment permits a reduction in unit cost of services such as financing, marketing, and technological research. Why? Because each overseas plant produces the same products in its entirely horizontal investment. May also have the advantage of allowing the firm to even out the effects of business cycle in various markets by rearranging sales destination across nations, right? So through vertical investment in which each affiliate produces through parts of the final product for which local production costs are lower, right? The MNEs may benefit from the local advantages in production cost, right, while achieving maximum economies of scale in the production of single components. So such an international integration of production would be more difficult to trade because of the need for close coordination of different producers and production phases. So this is what monopolistic advantages. Now next is internalization theory. Now internalization theory holds that the available external market fails to provide an efficient environment in which the firm can profit by using its technology and or production resources. So therefore the firm tends to produce an internal market via investment in multiple countries and thus creates the needed market to achieve its objective. So a typical M&A consists of a group of geographically dispersed and goal disparate organizations that include its headquarters and different national subsidiaries. So These M&Es achieve their objectives not only through exploiting their proprietary knowledge, but also through internalizing operations and management. So internalization is the activity in which an M&E internalizes its globally dispersed foreign operations through a unified governance structure and common ownership. International theory argues that internalization creates contracting through a unified integrated intra-firm governance structure. Now, let me tell you, it takes place either because there is no market for the intermediate product needed by M&Es. For example, Spark, a global power transmission manufacturer, must use intermediate goods such as couplings and backstops produced by its Brazilian subsidiary, owing to the unavailability from any outside source, or because the external market for such products is insufficient. For example, IBM's speech recognition technology is transacted internally among different units. Why? Because the external market has not been developed through enough to properly value and protect such expertise. So it depends, right? So the cost of transaction conducted at arm's length in an internal market, that is a fair price in an open market, may be higher than transaction within an inter-organizational market. So the incentive to internalize activities are to avoid disadvantages in external mechanisms of resource allocation or to benefit from an internally integrated or intra-organizational network, right? So this theory also specifies that the common governance of activities in different locations. Like for example, Rubbermaid's subsidiary in China uses material supplied by its subsidiary in Thailand and then ships products to the United States, Europe, and Japan. Right? So, in many industries, M&Es are no longer able to compete as a collection of nationally independent subsidiaries. Rather, competition is based in the part on the availability to link or integrate subsidiary activities across geographic locations. So, that is important. So to summarize, internalization advantages include the following. There are 8 points I've given for you all. So to avoid search and negotiating cost, to avoid cost of moral hazard. Moral hazards refers to hidden detrimental action by external partners such as suppliers, buyers, or joint venture partners. To avoid cost of violated contracts and ensuing litigation. Next, to capture economies of interdependent activities. Next, to avoid government intervention, that is quotas, tariffs, price controls, etc. We'll see this in the coming videos. To control supplies and conditions of sale of inputs, including technology, of course. To control market outlets. And last is to better apply cross-subsidization, predatory pricing, and transfer price. So, through internalization, global competitive advantages are developed by forming internal economies of scale and scope and by triggering organizational learning across national markets, right? So, operational flexibility can leverage the degree of integration. The allocation and dispersal of resources, both tangible and intangible, right, serve as a primary device for maintaining operational flexibility in global business activities. So essentially, by directing resource flows, an M&E may shift its activities in response to changes in tax structures, labor rates, exchange rates, governmental policy, of course, competitive moves, and other uncertainties that come in. So thus, resources flows are a necessary condition for achieving either a location-specific or competitive advantage in a global business. And resource flow requires internalization within an M&E network because it involves independence among subsidiaries, right? So internalization in turn requires centralized decision-making responsibility and authority. Nevertheless, control should be segmented, of course, by product line and distributed among different subsidiaries, depending on particular capabilities and, of course, environmental conditions. So to summarize, the product life cycle theory adequately describes how a new M&E develops a new product and then engages in FDI. But however, it fails to describe the action of existing M&Es with substantial FDI that may skip steps in the model or even reverse the process. The next theory we studied is monopolization theory, suggests that the core competencies of an M&E are product over which it holds a monopoly. So FDI occurs where it is more cost effective to directly exploit and market these monopolies and then to license them to a local company. And the last, internalization theory, it states that one of the major reasons for M&Es to engage in FDI is to internalize most parts of the production process. So this significantly reduces normal business risks and gives the M&E economy of scale advantages, of course. And the eclectic paradigm restates this concept and integrates it with corporate monopolization and national comparative advantage. So in this video we studied about different theories of FDI. Go through it, okay? In the next video we'll cover more topics from international business environment. So wait for more videos of mine. Thank you.